Welcome to another mailbag session. Remember, these are questions and comments you guys leave on the channel. But before we get going on this session, remember, normal parish notices apply. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? Hit the subscribe icon. If you want to be notified when new content hits the channel, it's the bell icon's the one you need. If you like the contents of this video, give it a thumbs up. Consider becoming a member of the TMTG community. It's always a big mouthful. The address is down the bottom, as are the Facebook and Instagram tags. Go tag me over there. But now back to the video. Okay, so this item comes from Twitcho Purio. I think I got that right. And he writes, I'm assuming it's a he, great, but what about pad 7? And this was in response to setting up the TR8 video I did back in December 2015. Can't believe I've had the TR8 since 2015. So when I did the setup video, basically I missed out pad 7. There was a very good reason why I missed out pad 7, because it was undocumented at the time. Roland didn't actually tell us what it did. So with the advent of the firmware, which was version 1.12, they introduced the pad 7 functionality, and it was documented at some point after that. It wasn't documented with the release, it was documented after the release. And it's a bit of a technical change, this one. Basically, the sequencer, sorry, the step sequencer within the TR8 is closely modelled on the TR-808. As we all well know, that's the reason why many of us went and bought it. And the TR-808 had a habit of wandering slightly in terms of timing. In other words, the timing was not precise. It was kind of precise. Okay, and that's exactly how the TR-808 worked. It worked on this basis that it was about a 16th beat, but not precisely a 16th beat based on the tempo that you set on the unit. So therefore, a cymbal or a drum kick or something could be slightly ahead or it could be slightly back. But that kind of gave the TR-808, I suppose, its warmth in terms of, you know, it was there, but it wasn't precisely there. But that's how it worked. That's how the clock unit in the TR-808 worked, and that's what you got. And that is how the TR8 is modelled. It's modelled on this sort of slightly randomness that is introduced by the modelling of the TR-808 clock. And what pad 7 does is it allows you to be precise. Okay, so if you want it on the 16th beat, if you press pad 7, if I remember correctly, if you press pad 7, you'll get it precise. If pad 7 is unlit, that's the default state, it's kind of precise. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. So it's kind of, if you're an absolute purist and you need something dead on the beat, you need to have pad 7 engaged. If you want somebody who is, if you're somebody that's a purist and wants it to exactly model the TR-808, you want pad 7 unlit. But that's what pad 7 does. This one comes from Garage Kataka, and it's in response to a Roland System8 video I did about installing the firmware. When I put the version 1.11, the Juno 106 upgrade. So for those of you who don't remember, when the System8 came out, effectively it came out and it didn't have the Juno 106 on it. So you had to do a firmware upgrade almost immediately to get your 106 on it. And that was back in December 2016. And this tuber writes, firstly, it's Aria, not Area. Sorry, Area, not Aria. I knew I was going to say that as soon as I wrote it down. Secondly, it's a synth engine, not patches. And thirdly, from a marketing point of view, we'll not see versions 1.03, 1.04, 1.05, etc. As it looks as there have been lots of bugs to fix. So you will see the firmware release jump as not numbers jump in sequence. I'll get that out in a minute. And I honestly haven't been drinking. And it's a good shout out, because some people, when they're looking for version numbers online, quite often get confused when they see version numbers from manufacturers jump, so they're not quite sequential. And I think it's probably a bit of bad practice from Roland's perspective that they haven't gone 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, because normally in the software industry, and I work in the software industry, you have another point release behind that. So you go 1.1.1, 1.1.2, 1.1.3. And based on how you do your software development, quite often 1.2 is a release candidate, and then you test it, and if it's okay, it then gets released. That's generally how this stuff works. But it seems that I think Roland have been round the hoops a few times, because they've had 1.03, 1.04, all the way up to 1.11, which is when the Juno 106 upgrade arrived. So I kind of get that, and maybe it's something that just needs to be relayed to people who don't work in the software industry, so they realise that when you go to the Roland website, you probably are going to see quite a big jump, because that's the way Roland have been coding their releases. So that's the first thing. So we did do quite a big jump on the Roland System 8 releases when it first came out. So I think when I picked mine up, it was set at version 1.02. That was the release, the base release firmware version for the System 8. And then it went to 1.11, which was the Juno 106 release, and then it went to 1.20, and then it went to 1.30, which was the version of the firmware that was on the System 8 at the point I wrote the reply, and this reply is a couple of months old. And so there would have been increments between them, but it's I find it very frustrating with software houses when all of a sudden they start changing their release and numbering policy. I worked for a software company a few years ago, and we went from version 5.x to version 6.x, and then because 6.x was so terrible, we then changed the numbering sequence, so nobody had a clue what was quite going on. Rather than going to the version 7, we actually reverted back to 5. Something weird, but it was an utter pain in the rumpsy, if you get my drift. Now, the interesting thing about the Roland System 8 was that when it was released with the base version of code on it, and it had the Jupyter 8 patches on there, but not all of them. So when you did a release, when you bought the System 8, the first thing you had to do was you had to go and put a patch on straight away to get the Jupyter 8 releases, and then you shortly after had to put another patch on to get the Juno 106. And the reason why you had to do that was very, very simple. The code for these instruments didn't make it. So rather than Roland push the release of the System 8 back, what Roland actually did was they put the synth out into the market, and then very quickly rushed out patches to market to meet the functionality that was missing. And I think they had more problems coding the 106 and the Jupyter 8 than they really wanted to admit, as part of the whole sort of ACB thing. Which stands for Analog Circuitry Behavior Modeling, by the way, if you don't know what ACB is. But that was the technology they were using on the System 8 and the System 1 and a number of the other ARIA pieces of equipment. So yes, that was why you all of a sudden had to do the release. So if you buy a System 8 and it's not on at least version 1.11, then you need to upgrade it, because you won't get the Jupyter 8 in position 2 and the Juno 106 in position 3. Okay, so there you go. That was that one.